Good afternoon in New York and Eastern North America. Good morning, Los Angeles and the Western parts. Good evening in England, Europe, and Africa. And welcome whatever time of day or night for you all who are joining us from all corners of the world. I'm Yael Danieli, founder and executive director of the International Center for Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma, ICMGLT for short. Thank you for joining our very important webinar, From Resolutions to Reality, Reigniting the Global Movement to End FGM. For decades, women's rights activists, parliamentarians, grassroots organizations, and government representatives worldwide have united to combat female genital mutilation, or FGM, and other forms of violence against women that are perpetrated in the names of preserving cultural practices, but constitutes grave violations of the human rights of women. In the lead up to the globally observed International Day of Zero Tolerance for Female Genital Mutilation on this coming Thursday, 6 February, and more than 12 years after the adoption of the landmark United Nations General Assembly Resolution 67/146 banning FGM worldwide, this International Center for Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma, in total collaboration with No Peace Without Justice webinar, convenes a distinguished panel of experts and activists. Together, they will examine the ongoing challenges faced by the anti-FGM movement and explore strategies to reinvigorate efforts for meaningful change for current and future generations. Your moderator, I, am a clinical psychologist, traumatologist, victimologist, and psychohistorian. Having developed the first program to help Nazi Holocaust survivors and their children in the 1970s, I have devoted much of my career to studying, treating, writing about, and preventing lifelong and multi-generational impacts of massive trauma worldwide, to ensuring victims' rights, to the rights of future generations, and to reparative justice. For me, justice is reparative when it is thought of not only in the outcome of operations, but in the full process of the realization of victims' rights in the victim-survivor's relationship with a justice system that is holistic, multidisciplinary, and integrative. Today's first speaker is Giulia Schiavone, a human rights and gender activist and program advisor for the Gender and Human Rights Program at No Peace Without Justice. Giulia has worked on initiatives addressing systemic gender inequality, including co-authoring a study on child marriages in Italy. Her work focuses on practical strategies to tackle pressing human rights challenges, particularly those impacting gender equity and vulnerable groups. Our second speaker, Comfort Momo, is a renowned midwife, author, and activist dedicated to combating female genital mutilation. Originally from Nigeria, based in the UK since 1985, Comfort established the African Well Women's Clinic in London in 1997, providing specialized care to women affected by FGM, including reparative surgery, among others. A leading voice in raising awareness and supporting survivors, Comfort has made significant contributions to the global fight against FGM. Third is Rugiatu Nenture, a leading advocate against FGM and gender-based violence in Sierra Leone. As the founder of the Amazonian Initiative movement, she leads courageous grassroots efforts to empower women and combat child marriage and violence against women. Rugiatu previously served as Deputy Minister of Social Welfare, Gender and Children's Affairs, using her position to push for stronger policies to protect women and children. Our fourth speaker is Amiatu Dimonekene, passionate human rights advocate, public speaker, and champion of survivor-led advocacy and community engagement. Alimatu is originally from Sierra Leone and now based in the UK. She focuses on youth empowerment and encouraging girls as agents of change. A founder and director of A Girl at a Time in Sierra Leone, a social impact organization, she designed impactful programs with culturally adaptive strategies in combating harmful traditional practices such as FGM. Last but not least is Kadi Kolta, a Senegalese activist, author, and influential advocate in the global fight against FGM and forced marriages, a survivor herself. Her experiences have fueled her advocacy, making her one of the most recognized voices in these issues, in Europe and Africa. She is the author of Mutilé and the founder and president of La Palabra, a women's rights organization that established a shelter for vulnerable women in Senegal. I hope you're as humbled as I am. We have an hour and a half for the webinar, though we have been known for a most engaged audience who keeps us longer. Each of our panelists will speak for about 8 minutes. Following an interchange among us, I will open the floor to questions and brief comments from the virtual audience. We will then conclude with quotes, last words. Please use the Q&A or chat function, and we will do our best to respond to as many questions or brief comments as we are able. Feel free to direct your question to a particular panelist or to the full panel. For a contextual presentation, I now have the honor to offer the screen to Giulia Schiavoni. Giulia, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Danieli, and good afternoon, everyone. It's truly an honor for me to be here today and to talk about such an important issue to which I have dedicated more than 20 years of my life, and my colleagues and friends here even more. We are discussing this today not just because it's a widespread human rights violation, but also because February 6th marks the International Day of Zero Tolerance for Female Genital Mutilation. And this is a time to reflect on the progresses that we've made the challenges that remain, and most importantly, what we can do to finally put an end to this harmful practice. FGM affects millions of girls and women worldwide. It's a violation of multiple human rights. It causes immense physical and psychological harms, and it leaves consequences that can last for generations. And it is deeply linked to gender inequality and control over women's body and sexuality. So today I'll make just an introduction to walk you through what FGM is, the different forms it takes, the debates and the myths that have surrounded it, and what we can do to prevent it and to support survivors. So let's start with what is FGM. It includes different forms of cutting or altering female genitalia for non-medical reasons. It can range from the partial removal of the clitoris and labia to more extreme forms such as infibulation, where the vaginal opening is stitched, leaving only a small hole for urination and menstruation. In some cases, FGM also includes procedures like pricking or burning. But no matter the form, all types of FGM have serious physical and emotional consequences. Pain, infections, complications during childbirth, and also psychological trauma. FGM is a very critical issue, and for many years it has been very difficult even to talk about it, let alone, of course, acting against it. And first of all, there has been a lot of debate around the terminology, the words we use to describe FGM. In different cultures, people call it by different names. Female circumcision is one of the most common, but others use, for example, medical terms like excision, which is very neutral. But in the late 70s, it was a group of African activists that deliberately chose the term mutilation to make it clear that this is not just a cultural practice, but it is an act of violence, gender-based violence. And the term was formally adopted in the 90s by the WHO and the United Nations. But why the terminology is so important? It is because many people argue that FGM should be respected as part of culture. But human rights are universal. So every girl and woman have the right to live free from harm, to have the right to self-determination and to a full development. So the term mutilation was deliberately chosen by African activists who wanted to highlight the damage done by FGM and also the need to fight against it. So that said, the debate hasn't ended because in the 2000s, the UN started using the term female genital mutilation / cutting to soften a little bit the language and avoid stigmatizing communities that still practice it. But meanwhile, especially in some Francophone countries, activists prefer to call it sexual mutilation, mutilation sexuelle, since they believe it better reflects how FGM impacts on women's sexuality and pleasure and how it is a practice to establish men's control over women's sexuality, body, and life. So besides the debate around the terminology, there are also a lot of misconceptions about FGM. And these myths often have made harder to eradicate the practice. Some of the most common myths are that FGM, for example, is safe if done in a hospital, the so-called medicalized FGM. But the reality is that even if performed in a medical setting, FGM still causes lifelong harm. So the setting does not change at all the consequences over the women's body. The other myth is that FGM is part of a cultural identity. So yes, FGM has been practiced for generations in some cultures, but that doesn't make it right, because cultural identity should not come at the cost of human rights. Human rights should always prevail over harmful traditions. Some have also tried to introduce symbolic forms of FGM, but no form of FGM can be acceptable. Even less severe procedures violate women's and girls' rights and can still cause long-term physical and emotional damage. There have been also the justification that FGM is required by religion, and specifically Islam. But no major religion mandates FGM. And in fact, it is not just practiced in Islamic countries. And over the years, many religious leaders have clearly stated that FGM is not required by Islam or any other faith. Also, FGM has been relegated for decades as an African issue. But while FGM is commonly associated with sub-Saharan countries and the Middle East, it is also found in Asia and in South America, and also because of the presence of diaspora communities, including in Europe and North America, it is a global issue, of course. One of the hardest things about FGM is that it doesn't just affect the person who undergoes it, but it has an impact on entire families and communities. So many women who have survived FGM experience severe psychological distress, which of course affects their relationship within the family, the relationship with children. Daughters may grow up fearing the same fate. Boys may internalize also the idea that controlling women's bodies and sexuality is normal. So this creates a cycle of trauma that passes from one generation to the next. So tackling FGM is not just about stopping the practice. It's also about healing the emotional wounds and the physical, of course, that is already caused, and making sure that the next generation doesn't have to live with the same fear. So FGM is a deeply rooted issue, but we know by experience that change is possible. There is no single solution. Ending requires action at multiple levels, through education, policy change, laws, support for survivors, but we have seen that we can make a real difference. Now to discuss about these aspects more deeper, I will now give the floor back to Yael and to our speakers who will provide us with valuable insights on their experience on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julia, for providing the context. But I'm sure, which I'm sure will be added and deepened by everyone else. Comfort, may I please offer the screen to you now?
Thank you so much. And thank you for organizing this, and thanks to our viewers as well. Just to follow on in terms of the background, I'm going to read a poem just to give you a more insight to what FGM is about. It says, I realized that my ties have been pulled wide apart, and that each of my lower limbs were being held as far away from each other as possible, gripped by steel fingers that never relinquished their pressure. I felt that the rasping knife or blade was heading straight down towards my throat. Then suddenly, the sharp knife metallic edge seemed to drop between my thighs, and these cut a piece of flesh from my body. I screamed despite the tight hand held over my mouth, for the pain was not just a pain, it was like a shearing flame through the whole of my body. Each time I read this, I feel really emotional because I see this at the clinic that I ran for over 20 years at Guy's and St. Thomas's in London. It's very important as campaigner, activists, community, parents to have a true insight to what FGM is all about. And again, just to pull this up as well, FGM is everybody's business. Whether you are a teacher, it's important that you're aware of FGM. It's important to have an insight and also to be able to safeguard girls who might be at risk is very important. And all those who work within the family settings as well. Everybody that works around safeguarding is very important. So again, just to give you a key factors around FGM, as we know, as Julia has already mentioned, FGM comprises all procedures that involve either partial or total removal of the external genitalia. And we know that about 230 million girls and women alive today have undergone some form of FGM. And we know that FGM is prevalent in about 30 countries in Africa. It's prevalent in the Middle East, the Asians, the Malaysians, the Kurdish Iraqis, the Bora Muslim in India, they perform FGM as well. This is very important as key workers to be aware of this, because when you mention FGM, what comes to mind is, oh, it's only happening in Africa. It's in Africans that performs FGM. But it's very important that we're aware that it happens in other parts of the world as well. And also it's important to know the age at which FGM occurs as well. Most carried out as a young girl between infancy and 15-year-olds. As Julia has mentioned, there are lots of rights involved in FGM. The right to the highest attained standard of health is very important. The right to life and physical integrity, including freedom from violence. The right to equality and non-discrimination, and the basic of sex. Right of the child. FGM is associated to inequality. This is very important. As survivors, as campaigners and activists, it's important that we're aware of the issues around equality, around the right of the child, and safeguarding as well. I won't go into the types because Julia has already done that, but I will try to mention the complications of FGM. This can be divided into immediate complication, intermediate, and long-term complication. The immediate complication, obviously, you have hemorrhage, which again is very important to be able to make the link between FGM and hemorrhage, because sometimes people tend to think once you cut the clitoris is very vascular, very rich in blood supply. When you remove the clitoris, the child can bleed to death. And sometimes, unfortunately, some don't make the link between the excessive hemorrhage. So it's very important. If you remove a vascular area, obviously you will bleed, you will hemorrhage. So it's important to be aware of that. There is pain, which is obvious. If you remove a flesh from your body and from the body, obviously you will bleed, you'll have pain, you'll have excessive pain, and sometimes girls can go into shock. Abscess can occur, even death as well. And some of the research that I've done in some different African countries, people don't make the link between death and FGM. Sometimes if a child dies from hemorrhage, it's meant to be she's a witch, that's why she dies. So people give different reasons. The long-term complication can include issues during having sex, especially if you have type 3. At Guy's and St. Thomas's, where we set up the clinic about, I think in 1997, and Guy's and St. Thomas's clinic was the second clinic that was set up in the whole UK then. And this was set up because then none of the doctors, the midwives, the pediatrician have the knowledge around FGM. Women were presenting to different parts of the hospitals, like gynecology department, presenting to obstetric with FGM related problem. and nobody seems to know how to help or how to support women. Hence, we set up the clinic. Like I said, it was the second clinic, and we provided support, counseling, information, referral for psychosexual counseling, and also we did lots of de-infibulation as well, which is opening the closure, the type 3 closure. So, and I did that on the local anesthetic, and we did average of 2 to 3 every week at the clinic, and the clinic ran for about 20 years. So we did see lots of women and girls at the clinic. The other thing that I need to talk about in terms of providing services for women and girls, sometimes it's very difficult for women to know where the clinics are. It's very difficult to signpost women to where clinics are, because they might be new in the country, they might not speak the language. So again, if you are a provider, it's very important that you're able to signpost women and girls to various clinics. And the other thing that we do as well is we make referrals to women in terms of family planning, in terms of sexual health, in terms of also in terms of smear tests, breast examination, and all the other issues around FGM. The other, I'm just trying to think, because I'm trying not to overlap with the other speakers. The other issues, which is very important, is to create space for women and girls to be able to talk about their experiences, to be able to come out to talk about what has happened to them. So again, it's very important looking at it. And the other things that we provided at the clinic then is encouraging doctors and nurses to raise awareness, to be able to sensitively support women and girls, providing holistic care, especially during labor and delivery as well, because sometimes for some of these women, it might be the first time they actually seeking help when they come to the clinic. Nobody has told them they've been through FGM. I've had lots of women at the clinic that come to me, we've raised awareness, we've talked to them, and it'll be the first time ever somebody has actually talked to them about FGM. So again, it's very important as providers to be aware. And like I said, especially during pregnancy, labor, and delivery, where a woman comes in, you're able to give them information, give them counseling, and also if they need de-infibulation, then we advise them to have that done during pregnancy. Because obviously when they come in labor, once they've had the de-infibulation done, it's easy and bearable to be able to physically examine them, and also to be able to determine whether they're in labor or not, as well as be able to know the stage of labor they have, like examining the by determining whether they're in labor or not, assessing the cervixes and all that. Also providing safeguarding information. Here in the UK, we have what we call mandatory reporting and mandatory recording, which is very important, and also making referrals to the social services so that they can have ongoing support. And that's what we do at the clinic. Thank you. Ah, okay. I didn't hear that.
So it happens to me too. So thank you so much, Comfort, for your sensitive and detailed presentation. It opens up so many questions in my mind, but that's for the dialogue among us. Rugetu, I believe we are going to be honored with your presentation. So please unmute like I had to do. Yeah. Rugetu?
Thank you very much for this very important session. I will not waste time on a definition as we listen to the two speakers. I will focus on our work on shifting from activism to political action.
Perfect.
Yeah, we are looking at existing legislatives, the laws we have to address FGM. And we look at it as an assault, common assault. And we look at it from the prevention of HIV/AIDS.
Excellent.
We look at it under the offenses against a person's act, wounding with intent. And the reason being that we don't want a backlash. And also we know our government is resisting from having a specific law. And because of that, we need to look at ways on how we can address FGM within the laws that we have. And so one of the things we are doing is to engage with different ministries. Again, a lot of people, when they address FGM, their focus is just on the Ministry of Gender.
Exactly.
And so it is limited on gender as a gender issue. But we look at FGM beyond gender. We look at FGM as an issue that have social problems. It concerns social welfare. So we target the Ministry of Social Welfare. We look at FGM as an issue that have security problem. So we target the Ministry of Internal Affairs. We look at FGM like it has to do with education. And so the Ministry of Education is equally targeted. And now we have the Ministry of Information and Civic Education. It is important also when it comes to the issue of FGM. And so is the Ministry of Local Government, because it works directly with the custodians of tradition. And again, we look at the Ministry of Political and Public Affairs, because FGM is supported by politicians and it also has a public face. So we believe these ministries are important. And not to mention about the health ministry, because when you look at FGM, you focus more on its health consequences. But again, we also look at the Ministry of Tourism and Cultural Affairs, because FGM is also a cultural issue. So our approach is to make sure we have interministerial coordination and that these ministries can mainstream FGM in their different works. We work with the police, and which has actually helped in what we are doing. before coming to this webinar today, the police, the Ministry of Social Welfare, the Ministry of Gender, the Ministry of Education, and AIM staff, we are in a community. We are 3 girls. We are confined in a shrine to be trained to become practitioners. So this ministry come together to make sure the girls we are freed from the shrine. This is because of the coordinating efforts that we are working to look at. And so every ministry now see itself as having a responsibility to take action to protect women and girls. It is not just the Ministry of Social Welfare. And again, because our government actually does not want to take action in terms of making a legislation. And so what we have done is, how do we work with this institution as activists to demand governments in particular to respect the international treaties they've signed, and also to make sure our constitution and all the acts, the HIV/AIDS Prevention Act, that is very clear for if anybody promotes anything that transmits FGM, you commit a crime. So the AIDS institution, it's now aware, and they know that we are not talking about culture or tradition, but we are talking about protecting women and girls from contacting HIV and AIDS. And now you see everybody is involved, from the Ministry of Education to the Ministry of Gender to the Ministry of Social Welfare to the police. And you have the senior district officers who work with the Ministry of Local Government at district level. We work together with them to make sure we address FGM. And our focus is on prevention rather than cure, because most times we don't have the money for survivors. But when you put a strategy to make sure you protect the girls and women from being caught, it is better than to spend on survivors. So we are focusing on people making genuine policies. But again, we don't want our government to make laws because they want to satisfy our international partners, laws that they are not implementing, or because somebody else can come and say, oh, I am not interested in this. So our focus is to make sure everybody within our community understands why we need to work together to protect women and girls, and how we can do that by upholding our culture, because for us in Sierra Leone, FGM is practiced within the Mbondo culture. So everybody understands now that each and every institution has a role to play. One, to uphold what they've signed as a government, and 2, as a government, they have the responsibility to protect lives. And FGM is a life-threatening practice. So we are working on coordinating efforts through different ministries to protect women and girls.
What a brilliant way of thinking, and on the global system rather than different silos. And of course, we will talk more about the culture as the culture issue during the discussion, because it's so clearly important. For years, I asked myself, is it cultural will or political will? And the relationship between those two. So I would probably ask you that to learn from your wisdom about that. And what a lesson in advocacy, systemic advocacy. God bless you. Thank you. Amiatu, I know that you are also following the steps of Rugiato, so please share your lessons with us now.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Gill. And it's Alimatu. And it's
sorry.
I mean, just with Comfort, Rugiatu, and of course, our colleague Julia has already spoken. I've been in the activism and advocacy work for over 30 years. And for me, it's an honor because, as you all know, Comfort was actually my midwife who delivered my first child, who's almost 32 now. So it gives you sort of an idea of how long, as a survivor, an activist, and a campaigner, we have been working on the issue of end FGM. So in my case, not just as an advocate, but as I said, as a survivor, for me, FGM sits in a very unique role for me, and that is about it being a violation on a girl and a woman's life, and what else can be done. And for me, it's bringing along everybody. Comfort, Rugia to have spoken the role of government, organizations, and I think the next role would be the role of the intergenerational or the next generation of activists, and what their role is going to be is what I'll be talking on. And how do we focus on the importance of their role? How do we engage with the next generation of activists to continue this fight? I mean, we have faced lots and lots of challenges, but it's so important to show that we are making progress. And how do we counter the growing influence of pro-FGM? And we cannot dismiss the fact that there is also a pro-movement going on. We see the challenges we faced in the Gambia. We saw the challenges we faced in Kenya. And this narrative is ongoing, and we have to embrace or look at these challenges and what they entail for us in the future, and the protection and safeguarding of our girls and our daughters. So I'm going to read because there's a lot we need to incorporate in the work that we're doing. FGM, as we all know, it's a global issue. We must act now. In 2024, the UNICEF data that was released on the impact of FGM and girls at risk mentioned that 4.3 million girls since 2016 have already been faced with FGM. So we are at a losing end, and we need to act quick. Many people still believe that FGM is a distant issue and therefore it's confined to small regions, or maybe it's a culture, it's a tradition. The reality is that FGM is happening in over 90 countries, okay? And we are seeing a growing in terms of the number. Though we see changes in little communities, FGM remains a threat to our children, our girls, and our women. So we have to include communities like the diaspora. Our work has always been involving in affected communities, perhaps in Africa, in Asia, in the Middle East. Even though we work with diaspora communities in countries like the UK, where I live and where I've been working for over 25, almost 26 years in my local community, there is still a lot that needs to be done within these communities. What we do know, every year, at least 4 to 3 million girls, like I said earlier, in the UK, US, Canada, and Australia, in terms of the diaspora, at risk of undergoing FGM, either maybe taking them back to their countries of origin, or maybe even within their countries. We know in the UK, we had several cases where girls have been cut within the United Kingdom, something that most people did not think would happen. It's happening still. You know, there is also the concern of the medicalization. We're seeing that in so many other countries in the Far East. We know medicalization, even in the UK. I mean, with the onset of entertainment and sort of the social media growth, is seeing girls and women opting to medicalize, or augmentations, I call it, going into plastic surgery around the issue of FGM. These are FGM. We made commitments many, many years ago. We still have laws and legislation in place to protect our women and girls from the practice of FGM. So we know so many countries, including and agencies, including the World Health Organization, is reinforcing again its commitment and ensuring that women and girls are not subjected to FGM. So while progress has been made, we are also witnessing a dangerous resurgence, as I said, in Gambia, in Kenya, of the pro-FGM rhetoric. So in my work with A Girl at a Time is working particularly with young people. because over the years through our campaign, and I must admit, I'm also included, we have not brought the information directly to the young people in terms of facts, data, and surveys, and so many research we now have that could amplify the voices of young people. So while we think progress has been made, we're still witnessing this dangerous resurgence around, often disguised as a cultural preservation or bodily autonomy. It's my right. I can do whatever I want it to my body. It's my culture. It's my tradition. But we've got to urge the banning of FGM must be in place. It's not a substitute to a tradition. It's not a substitute to a culture. It's a violence. It's an abuse. It's something that goes beyond our normal way of life. And we know it's affecting the health and well-being of girls. Many, many years ago, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. I had no understanding of what it was until I sat down and I was given this explanation of how I got to be diagnosed, or how I got the illness of post-traumatic stress disorder. There are so many women and girls affected by this practice, and we must do everything we can to stop that. So FGM is part of so many girls in Africa, where I come from, identity. We have got to change that. It's not an identity or a way of life for our women and our girls. It's something that was brought on as a way to oppress women and girls. And we have to educate our young people, educate the next generation of activists on what this is about and what it means for so many. So engaging the next generation, for me, is pivotal. We are at a crucial time of our history, looking back at everything that is happening. We know in America, there was a pushback on abortion rights, that the same pro-activists that are trying to change the narrative around FGM are now sort of hanging on to the abortion rights and turning that around as a way to convince the communities about FGM. These two issues are not one and the same. And so for me, I think the importance of engaging the next generation is crucial. The fight to end FGM must be intergenerational. It must be intersectional. We cannot afford to lose the momentum that we have gained through the endless work since 2004, 2003, when we had Zero Tolerance Day declared. We have got to continue with that fight because we have made huge progress, and we need to emphasize on these progress. We need to hold governments accountable, and we also need to encourage everybody to be part of this movement, holding on to our young people, creating mentorship, which is what we do at A Girl at a Time, is mentoring young people about the importance of human rights, the importance of seeing FGM as a violation of their right, and working within the confines of the law to re-educate and reinstitute in our young people that they have a right, and they have to speak up about their rights and have to believe that they have the right. And we do this through digital means. So we use a lot of social media, digital activism. I think it's the next way forward. And we are using that in telling our stories. I mean, most of our young people that are engaging with A Girl at a Time come with this attitude that we are not embarrassed. Over time, we've worked with organizations, and my colleague is here, Hawa Dabo Sise, who was recently recognized by King Charles with an OBE for her work in ending FGM. As a survivor, working within our stories and telling our stories as survivors is crucial. Having a survivor-led voice in all the work that we do is pivotal. I know sometimes people think, well, it's too much. We need to move on. We can't keep holding on to the past. We can't go forward if we don't look at what we have come from, right? So making anti-FGM advocacy very inclusive to sustain the movement, which would mean working with our young people, our religious leaders, the marginalized communities. There are still so many communities. We haven't even started talking about women and girls living with disability, women and girls living with things like urbanism, women and girls who have no access to finance. There's so many areas that we have still sort of not included in the campaign and in the fight for the last 30 years that I have been involved in. Of course, we need to now speak on sort of diverse perspective, which is good. I mean, I know in certain parts of in Africa, in particular in Sierra Leone, there's a talk of alternative rites of passage. I think there are more perspectives that we must look into. Not all communities are the same. And this idea that we only use alternative rites only in Africa, I would like to know what is being done in Asia. I would like to know what is being done in India. I would like to know what is being done in the Far East. You know, it's a global world. When we look at digital and when we look at young people, you know, we are now a global citizen and everybody is within that space and we need to know what everybody else is doing. So we have got to counteract the backtracking. You know, we have to hold governments accountable. Even ourselves as activists and international human rights organizations, we all have a part to play in this discourse in ending FGM and violence in general against women and girls. So we have got to reframe the narrative. Instead of saying abolish a tradition, I think we need to use words like, let us honor our culture without the harm. Because again, so many people are tied in with their culture. You know, culture is a good thing, but when it harms us, it's not good for us. So this is the language our young people are using. And they say things, for example, I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor. You know, surviving FGM could mean a life and death for so many women and girls. So as much as our young people would like to use the word victims, it's fine. But a lot of them are saying, actually, no, I could have died. I have survived so many things when you look at all the challenges, teenage pregnancy, not being able to go to school, not being able to earn a living. This is impeding my health. It's impeding my well-being. So we need to do more. And of course, with the help of organizations like No Peace Without Justice, you know, we need to strengthen the laws and policies that we have around human rights, the well-being of our women and girls, safety and protection. You know, as Rugiatu said, looking at things like tourism, who would have imagined aligning tourism and FGM? Many tourists that go to Sierra Leone, for example, I'm from Sierra Leone as well. I just saw a video the other day, often go to places thinking they're celebrating what we would call FGM. I said, if I was a tourist in London, I wouldn't go to somewhere like, you know, celebrate things that we consider in London to be very harmful and disgraceful. But people go to Sierra Leone, wear clothing, wear the ornaments that women like myself, when we see it, I get flashbacks. I get traumatized because for me, I'm reminded when I see these tourists celebrating what essentially for me was something that caused me pain. Obviously, we can't help that. So how can we change that? A lot of the time, these narratives have got to change and laws are beginning to change. I know I have 8 minutes and I don't want to go too far, but I think the role of everybody in this webinar today, which is what I would like to emphasize on, is we can end FGM. I believe we can end FGM. As much as we are up against sort of a tidal wave in terms of the SDG goals, by 2030. For me, FGM has ended because in my generation, my children, I have 2 granddaughters who are girls, they will never experience FGM. So for my family, FGM has ended. And I think when we put it in that way, we certainly can end FGM by 2030, but we need a lot, including funding and support of survivors and activists, grassroots on the ground who are doing tremendous job. I should be going to Sierra Leone to do some activities with my young people, but this is something I'm doing on my own terms, not because I mean, I have to do it. I want to do it. It's in my best interest to do it because I believe I owe this much to my country, not just to the United Kingdom, but also to Sierra Leone. So we all can play a part in how we sort of end FGM. So my call for action today, and anybody watching this, please help us to amplify the voices of survivors, support young activists. There are so many. I mean, we're running a crowdfunding at the moment. It's been over a year. We've only raised £30. This is how important people see the work of activists and survivors. We need more money. We just simply cannot do our work without money. So if you can, do visit our website, www.agirlatatime.org, and see what you can do. And we want to challenge harmful narratives. There is so many going on at the moment, not just with FGM, online abuse, targeted abuse at vulnerable women and girls. It's on the rise, and we've got to do something to end that. And of course, I can't emphasize enough, We have got to hold governments accountable. We have got to hold ourselves accountable for the sake of our girls and the future generation. So I'll stop here for now. But again, thank you for everybody who has joined, and we would like to take questions if there are any. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Halima. Thank you for the call to action. Thank you for your passion and commitment. It's we need you as a model for advocacy.
We have to.
And it's a total pleasure. And please put anyone who wants to put any information, put it in the chat. Put your website on the chat so people can copy it and use it. Please. Okay. Last but not least, from the bottom of my heart, Kadi, please.
Thank you very much for this opportunity for this seance on FGM. Now, how many years? We work, we fight. For me, it's more than 45 years.
Mm-hmm.
We are in Europe, the first association who created to fight FGM in 1982 in Paris. It was a long time. And sometimes I say, it's sad and pity to continue to work, and some area they do many work and the work goes on, but some area they don't do nothing. And it's sometimes politics to use the population, don't say the truth about FGM. Just they think how they can continue to make politics. Thank you, Dr. Danieli, all the friends and colleagues. I'm Kadi, and I stand before you as a long-standing advocate, as someone deeply committed to the fight against FGM, forced marriage, and the broader struggle for women's rights. But this is not just a policy issue or a health concern. It is a matter of human rights, dignity, and freedom. I think all my colleagues explain very well, clearly, what is FGM and what work they done, like on the grassroots level. Now, first of all, I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to my esteemed co-speaker. Your dedication, insight, and unwavering, my English, sorry, commitment continue to drive this movement forward in a meaningful way. It is through collective voice like ours that we can challenge the status quo and demand real changement. As we include this discussion, let me be clear, FGM is not just a harmful tradition. It is an act of gender oppression, a tool designated to control women's sexuality. That's why at the beginning, the first association, they never say FGM, always female sexuality oppression. And blunt denial of their autonomy, the physical mutilation is merely the most visible manifestation of a much deeper issue, the objectification of women and the societal belief that their body do not belong to them. If we are not explicit about this reality, its purpose, its effect, then no strategy will ever be truly successful. This movement is about more than law, policy, and awareness. It is about power. It is about restoring autonomy to those who have been denied it for far too long. The Against Fight FGM is a fight for every woman and girl right to own her body, her future, and her dignity. A fight in which men too must be involved as actors of change. Let us not just speak of change. Let us demand it, create it, and sustain it. I really thank Dr. Danieli to organize this opportunity for the 6th February. For me, in many countries now, they do FGM on the babies. They said when the baby is growing, they don't remember. And now we know it's not true, because you met many young people, many young girls who are problems, who are trauma. And if you look deeply, you know it's about the FGM, what they done when they are babies. Thank you so much, all my friends and my colleagues there. And I hope it's just beginning and not the beginning for the webinar like this, to ask to the politics and ask also to the people who take all the decision to be involved for the dignity and for the human rights, and to stop thinking only for them sit. Thank you very much. Thank you to all. And thank also No Peace Without Justice for this opportunity. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you so much. My comrade, old warrior. We've been old warriors about the same many years. And I want to again and again and again thank No Peace Without Justice for its work in this area, among others. Indeed, when one of the reasons we decided to hold this webinar as part of our center, the International Center for Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma, is that I've been missing the visibility of FGM in the media. Somehow it's not been an issue beyond our NGOs, who are always fighting. So I said, okay, we need to do this. And of course, who do I call? No Peace Without Justice. And because of their commitment to this issue. And I invite us to continue to work together, especially on this issue. And FGM has so many implications for other For other group work that we do, we have working groups, a Haiti working group, we have a Yazidi working group, we have a Ukraine working group. And if it's open, if Julia, if the invitation and our invitation is open to do a working group together with No Peace on FGM, because I think I agree with the advocates. It is the right time. And it's the right time to shake the media again and to remind them that it's not gone. Just because there is a UN resolution, that's not the end of the fight. That's the beginning of the fight. But I promise that now we will have a dialogue among us. I'm sorry I feel so passionate that I talk more than I mean to. I wonder if you have comments about each other's presentations and questions of each other before we go to the audience, which, as I promised you, is so active. Amazing. So I wonder, please unmute yourselves. It's now our dialogue. Anyone wants to comment about what anyone else? Julia, for example, you gave the context. What do you think of how it was augmented by the other presentations?
I think it was very very interesting because everyone had a different perspective. So Rugiatu gave us the political side, as Tobe commented in the chat. It was very interesting, the shift from advocacy to politics. So how advocacy was effective to bring actual change into politics, into laws, ultimately. And of course, the Alimatu intervention was very, very inspiring, because it inspires activists and young activists, and this is very important because the fight cannot end with our generation. Must go on until FGM are completely eradicated. And of course, there was also comfort that explained us how they try to repair the damage. Of course, the damage is huge, but it's very important to assist the survivors because it also contributes in change the culture. Once the damage is addressed, probably that the mother won't do the same thing to the daughter. So it breaks basically the cycle. And then, of course, Kadi is, I mean, has been has been a colleague and a friend for me for 25 years. We have done a lot together. We have done campaigns. We started with the Stop FGM campaigns in the early 2000s. We continued with the campaign to the United Nations for the worldwide ban. And of course, she's the one who inspired us when we were young. We were both young, actually. I think that there are some questions in the question and answer, and maybe
there is one question, the question and answer, which is a very important one. But before we go there, I still would like to give the panelists a chance to comment on each other if you want to right now. Then we move to the audience. Rugiatu, I see that you would like to say something.
Yes, I saw a question on the chat that asked about how would we engage or involve men in the fight to end FGM. I'll say it's very much important to have men involved in the fight to end FGM. I'll take the examples of what is happening in our country when we invite people to come to workshops, we don't ask for men. We invite positions. Like, for instance, we want the paramount chiefs, we want the head of police, we want the medical personnel, and when they come to the conference, you find out that most of them are men. And because of that, and they make the decisions, so it is very much important. Like, we just ended a training session today with religious leaders. We have only one woman among the religious leaders. All of them are men. And so we started the engagement to make sure that these men can call the parts of the body, so they will be able to address what is affecting the women. And first, they were shy in calling the vagina. And so it's like, we have called this because you, as religious leaders, are also suffering because of this practice. And so the discussion opened. They bring on suggestions as to who next we should engage in the community. And all those they suggested are men. And I have also realized within the years of my work to end FGM that if men are involved, it becomes more easier. It becomes more easier. And that is why in our work, we use holistic approach to make sure everybody in the community is involved, because FGM is a community issue.
Right.
And when addressing it, whether you are a politician, when you are a religious leader, whether you are a health person, we train you as a parent, because we believe all of you have girls and you have a responsibility of protecting them. So we don't look at you as your sex or your status or the position you have. We train you as a parent who has a responsibility. So bringing men is very much important. Whatever you do, you have to bring them. But we don't give them a space to say they lead, but we have to work as partners in making the change.
Yeah, the center has done quite a bit about that through the years. I'm just wondering if any one of you have seen effective initiatives to have men join this crucially important conversation as allies. Is there a publication that you know of, or a research? And Toby, for your meeting, it could be interesting to look for one. I will help you. Has there been research, scientific research, or publication of how the men experience FGM throughout their life? What does it do to their relationship with their wives, with their daughters, with their sons, in a systematic way? Do you know of any? Because if not, perhaps we can inspire that kind of study together. Anyone of the panel can comment on that.
I don't think there is any, but I'm aware that men are more involved these days.
Yes.
Within
Right.
within UK here, there have been lots of organizations that have involved men, and men have been able to talk about supporting their wives, supporting their family, and making sure that their daughters are not being FGM. But you're right, we might need to look into this in terms of research.
Excellent. You see, Randy Sean Fisher is saying, I am a mankind. I would like to offer my perspective. Hey, let us allow you to speak. Robbie, would you please, yes, Randy, please offer your perspective. We are listening very
Okay, hi,
listening attentively.
can I show my video or?
Yes, we see you.
Oh, you do? Okay, so you can just see my picture, but you can't see my video. But anyways, I didn't really know much about FGM, but I met Alima too on a conference through USAID about a month and a half ago. And I reached out to her to have a conversation, and she responded to me with openness and not suspicion, which is very unusual. And it was because of how she interacted with me that enabled us to develop a partnership to raise the profile of FGM and then to help organizations, and in particular her organization, reach out to potential funders in a way that she has not in the past. So I just wanted to offer that. And maybe, Alima, maybe you could add a few notes to what I've just said and explain how we have engaged and how it's been helpful.
I certainly can.
Wonderful. Thank you, Randy. Go ahead, Alima.
Thank you so much. Yes, I mean, thank you so much, Rugiatu. I think over the years, we have not sort of understood the power that men have around the discourse to end FGM. Obviously, we know FGM is steep in patriarchal. We know FGM is a power dynamics. It's done because we to be marriage material for men. So I think the work over the years, Forward, if you all know Forward, did an incredible research and study into the role of men. They looked at particular communities, obviously Somali, Sudanese, in Belgium and in the UK. But over time, the role of men has evolved. There's a group in Kenya, Men Up, I think they're called Men Engage. Sorry, he's going to kill me, Tony. Who are doing an incredible job. And so for me, the approach was the same I applied to Randy. And I said several years ago, the United Nations declared the he for she. We know a lot of men, particularly white men, can open doors for women in general, not just Black women, but women in general. And what I've seen over time in my work in ending violence against women, when we go to men, I would use examples over the years, Tony Blair, Boris Johnson, David Cameron. When we hosted the Girls Summit in 2014, it was a personal conversation we had to have with these men, starting with the fact that they were fathers, they were husbands, they were, you know, they had women in their family. What can you do? I mean, we had men in the End FGM campaign in Africa. Today we have Dr. Morisande. He's a father, we call, of End FGM, and his role for me has been an influence. Nicolo, that we have in No Peace Without Justice, we saw the role that Nicolo and his colleagues played in trying to highlight that FGM was a human right violation. So I said to Randy, I said, you could do me a lot of favors. You know, you could do me a lot of good. And your expertise in the work of social enterprise or social impact, myself as a social entrepreneur, yes, I'm fighting human rights. You know, we don't have funding, but we still do the job nonetheless on 0 pence. This is because it's important for us to end FGM. So men's voices are powerful in this space. Yes, sometimes we have to obviously hold guard because we don't want, in some communities, unfortunately, men might dominate the conversation and would not allow women to have that space. And that is my concern, you know, but nonetheless, so far what we have seen over time and in different communities, and Randy's no exception, is that he has allowed me through his mentoring of me to see the worth I have in the work I do with people, particularly young people, is bringing his wealth of experience to say, these are things we can do together. I initially cried when I met him because I'm like, nobody has ever heard me speak this way. And where did you come from? And, you know, but for me, it was something that was so inspirational because, again, I said the role that white men play in oppression of women, is important, equally important in the role white men play to end violence against women and girls. Equally, Arab men, African men, our men need to see and hear our voices. And I think this is that time for us to do so. And it's the space that we have not seen in terms of research and further research and study into it, but we have a template, and that is the one of Forward that we all can use. And obviously Rugia too in her work in Sierra Leone with men and boys, and that of Tony Wabia in Kenya. I think we can look at examples of this and then pick what we think is important and that we like, and we can replicate that for ourselves. So yeah, thank you so much, Randy.
That is a great idea, particularly for example, for another webinar. So Toby of Forward, please be in direct touch with me and let's plan exactly this kind of webinar. And Randy, you please help. And of course, Raul, and of course, Nico, who are in the audience here. I think that would be a great idea, not only for FGM, but for the women's. You mentioned abortion. You mentioned so many women's issues that are not only pivotal but in danger, remain in danger no matter how far we go. So that would be excellent to again collaborate in doing such a webinar, not only, but any other ideas from this webinar to further webinars, and to create an international working group. We welcome, that's what we do. So please remain totally open for that. Rugia, please, your hand is up.
Yes, I saw another question.
Please, yeah, I can see that we are way beyond dialogue. We are dialoguing with everybody, which I love. Go ahead.
Okay, and the question says, what can, in your opinion, what form of international support are more effective in driving change domestically?
Yes, yes.
The work to end FGM has been going on for years, and a lot of money has been poured into it. But the reality remains that this money is being going to international organizations. And FGM is a tradition. International organizations don't go to the field. It is local people that go to the field. And most of this funding is used for administrative costs rather than project costs. So if international organizations want to support to end FGM, I'll suggest they do direct funding to local organizations who go to the field, understand the culture, speak the language, and can mingle with those communities where FGM is practiced. It becomes less expensive, but you see the results. When local organizations have taken the lead to champion, to end the practice, we are seeing the kind of results, the kind of change that is happening, even with the little money that they have. And again, international organizations have to see how they can adjust or change their criteria in terms of funding. There are criteria they have that actually like disadvantage local organizations because they cannot meet this criteria, yet they are the ones that are doing the job that is making the impact that we are looking for. So one way for me is to make sure direct funding goes to local organizations.
You're bringing tears to my eyes. Rugiato, my very first book, many years ago, it was for the 50th anniversary of the United Nations, it touched very seriously about the issue of local versus international organizations. And of course, anyone, I'm sure among all of us here today, have seen the challenge of what you remember. There is a saying about, do you want to give me fish or to teach me how to fish? So it's not only the rules of international organization, it's the goal of international organizations and the whole issue of sustainability, etc., etc. There's so much wisdom on this panel that anything we say, it needs a but afterwards, and however, and so much more. So I would like for 1 minute to give the floor to Rebecca Shute, who brought up not only the issue of international aid, but the particular time in history today. Rebecca, are you still here? Robbie, would you please give Rebecca the...
Sorry, I don't see her in the attendees right now.
Okay, so she might have needed to Rebecca chairs the Washington group for the International Criminal Court, and she brought up the issue, the current crisis in the United States about here. If you look in the chat, she is raising the issue of the United States foreign assistance freeze, you see, and how it will impact the work for FGM. She is the director of executive director of Citizens for Global Actions. Anyone gave that a thought? If she's already not here, we can go to other very important questions. Anybody wants to comment on that? How the aid freeze and the almost death of USAID will affect the situation. Go ahead, Alima.
Yes, I think with everybody else in the room, I think it's a sentiment we're all having at the moment. And it's a conversation myself just a few days ago and Randy had. You know, what will this mean in terms of the work that is already on the ground? We know we have several what I call active crises at the moment, the war in the DRC, the war in Sudan, and these are countries who are known to have, huge communities affected by FGM, child marriage, and other forms of violence against women and girls. And I think this is where the concern now lies for what I would say the challenge we're going to face in meeting the SDG goals of 2030. You know, we have these huge impacts of this. It's unimaginable. Just thinking of it is unimaginable. Cutting back so much money and so much funding, so much resources that could go to saving lives, not just ending violence, but when you think of, in our case, in Africa, in Sierra Leone in particular, a lot of girls who are affected by FGM are mothers also, and are more likely to die during childbirth. So we have just gone over the line of decreasing mortality rates, maternal deaths in Sierra Leone, and we've been doing well for the past couple of years. And if we have any challenge in that area, we could see the numbers rising again. And if we look in countries like Sierra Leone, the data suggests that over between 14 and 16, who were the mothers giving birth to babies in Sierra Leone, will be that targeted group of girls dying during childbirth. And we might also see, because again, without this, with a conservative view around women's rights and this ideal of apportioning women's rights, particularly abortion rights or safe motherhood. We are now watching in Sierra Leone and hoping and anticipating a change in Sierra Leone where there's a discussion around the safe motherhood bill. This will save lives if this bill was to go through, because again, we know majority of women or girls who go through the illegal route to have abortions are dying as a result of these decisions that they're making, and that could be made safer. Nonetheless, we're also seeing challenges with maternal services, antenatal provisions, breastfeeding and providing care for young women and their children. We're going to be faced with a challenge. And I think it's important that we take that into account. I don't know what needs to be done, but this is where we're turning back to Europe and maybe other parts of the world, perhaps in richer countries like Saudi Arabia, to see how they can also look at helping, because we can't always rely on the United States for help. And I think it's a message that is very clear that we're hearing from the Trump administration, that they do not want to, again, look after the vulnerable and the poorer countries around the world. So we got to turn to other people to help.
Go ahead. Anyone wants to pick on any other? Julia, do you see any other point? And all of them are so important and so accurate that you want to put the light on. Julia?
Yeah, talking about international support, I think that diplomatic pressure is also very important. And diplomatic pressure can have different forms. For example, in terms of commercial agreements, countries can push other countries to respect human rights, to respect treaties that often these countries have signed and ratified. So I think it's very important if we talk about, and of course, financial support to grassroots organization, as Rugiatu pointed out, is very important. And we have seen it working on the ground, actually. We have seen a lot of big projects from international organizations having very little impact, while the real impact can be effectively, we can have an effective real impact working on the ground at community level from a local organization who knows also how to work and how to deal with the communities still practicing FGM.
Absolutely. But I think there are really almost two webinars today. One is about FGM and one is about what effective advocacy is about and effective interventions. And I'm sort of amazed with how much we've learned. And that's what happens in excellent webinars. A lot of things happen that we don't really put in the title. Now, I want all of you, both the audience and the panelists, to please go over, please visit our website. We have over 60 webinars that touch upon so many crucial existential issues, including focusing on women's issues. And of course, this is one of them. So please, and so many intersectional ones. For example, with racism, with international harmful attitudes. We have so much to learn from each other. Go ahead. Alima, did you want to say something else?
Yes, no, I just because I saw a question about the medicalization, and I wanted to just share.
Very important, very important.
Yes. I wanted to share some of our case studies in London, where I worked in Newham for Hestia and Manor Gardens. And what we saw amongst some of our service users was who had concerns about medicalization and had come from countries where medicalization. So we had Sudanese, Yemenis, Nigerians, where they said, actually, for those that we know, sorry, I have a very noisy background. I'm trying to scream so you can hear. So many people did say, despite who they knew had medicalized FGM, they still had scarring. They still had difficulties giving birth. They still were having issues with intimacy. And the list is endless. We know there is still a rise in post-traumatic stress disorder, in anxiety for a lot of women who have had these augmentation. You know, there was a beautiful story, if any of you saw it on the news, of a famous actress who talked about her going to her doctor to have what we would have deemed as FGM. She didn't realize, she thought it was only going to be a very simple procedure, but it turned out to have been a full-blown, elongation, or what we call cutting of her labias. That in its essential, in its essence, a form of FGM. And now she talks of Brooke Shields. If you all know Brooke Shields, I grew up loving her as a brilliant actress. And now she's complaining of pain during intimacy and all the other stuff that comes with. So for me, that was a perfect example how medicalization can actually destroy women's bodies. It doesn't remove that fear that women have who have had FGM that is not medicalized. And this whole idea that because it's done in a medical setting, I was very privileged to be in a meeting that was hosted by the World Health Organization that highlighted the role that health practitioners play. The do no harm principle does apply. We're meant to heal wounds, not create wounds. We're meant to restore women's health, not destroy women's health, if you understand what I mean. So it's important that we continue to advocate for an end to medicalization. It doesn't change anything, and this view for some communities, that would say, oh, because I had a medicalized type of FGM, it's less invasive, it's less painful, it's less harmful. I disagree, because we have seen many folks that have gone through the medical route, in particular in countries like Sierra Leone. In fact, for years, I knew it was nurses and midwives that were actually conducting these procedures. And knowing that your role in the lives of these women is so important, we need to have medical practitioner. And why I love Comfort, because I was a patient of Comfort, and had it not been for Comfort, I would not have had my child. I was so scared to have FGM. I thought I was going to die. But she explained to me that despite me having the procedure, this is why I am in a better place in terms of the safety of the NHS, that I would deliver my baby. Obviously, the FGM will never go away, but I would deliver my baby safely, and I did. So it's important that we understand and support the role of medical practitioners in knowing that they play an important part. However, medicalization is not one of them. Yeah. So thank you so much.
I would like, if I may, I would like to add to this particular question of medicalization from the psychosocial point of view. Of course, you mentioned PTSD before, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is not quite medical in the physical sense, but it is medicalization of human experience and the aftermath of trauma. Extremely important for us to understand, to remain with the human experience rather than just to give a diagnosis, which people, that could be very mystifying to people who are not in the psychiatric medical field and might not be helpful and might not quite do the job that people are looking for, which is healing. So let's talk a lot more about that. That's another webinar we need. So thank you, Alima, for adding the reference. In general, our center has the most up-to-date digital library that contains, in our ambition, all publications that are relevant to intergenerational legacies of trauma in any discipline, be it medicine, be it history, being anthropology, being psychology, poetry, drama, playwriting, anything that's relevant. So please make sure to send us every related publications you think would fit. Also, Alima, too, I think you mentioned a video before. We do have a special section in the library on media, on all media. Anything that's relevant, send us so it becomes part of the section. We also have a special section on victims' rights, rights of future generation, and reparative justice. And we are talking about all of this. So please send us all so it begins in the larger picture. Okay? I want to share with you. Please, Toby, you're saying you want to share with us anything, please. Absolutely. So people can find what they're looking for. I wanted also, let me just check I took so many notes while you were talking, my God. Yeah. Yes, look at our webinar on HIV/AIDS, please. We have a lot of webinars already on many of the intersecting issues you brought up. So it would be interesting for you to look at them, for them to look at yours, and to learn together integrated knowledge. I want to share a secret before we close, before we ask for people's last words. I see Nicola is saying medicalization also has tragic consequences in terms of normalization, exactly, of the deliberate violations of the right to sexual autonomy and physical. Absolutely. It's totally. We should have a webinar on that, actually, so we can shed light on the different dimensions of this habit. But let me share a secret with you. Because we have done so many webinars that ended up about women, by women, for women. And by the way, for women is never against men. It's simply for women. And very often it's also for men. I would, March 8th is the beginning of, is the day of, the International Day of Women. And I'm going to simply open our Zoom for all women around the world to bring up whatever issues. So all of you who want to be present, please let me know. I think it's wild, but I think who knows what we'll find out that we don't know yet. And so the door is always open. And let me, before we close, actually, I want to share with you also that our upcoming webinar on February 20, the Day of Social Justice, would be on ombudsmen around the world. I call them ombudspersons around the world. Their unique advantages and challenges in working with victims. So I thought you'd want to know about that. Please, each one of you, feel free. What would you like people to be left with? Your last words, please. Let's start from the end. Kadi, your last words.
Oh.
Not forever, just for now.
Yeah, my last word just will be the politicians, the religious leader, the chief, all the people who can decide to know the woman and girl are human. And to respect the human right, to respect our body, and to respect our mind. Thank you.
Amen. Yes. Brilliant. Okay, please, Ali Matu.
Yes, I do agree with that as well. But for me, my last call, obviously, as a call to action, we must look at the narrative as it presents itself, and we must allow survivors to be the lead in all conversation. Because for me, it's almost like when we exclude certain groups, like I said, women living with disability, young people, survivors, what we are actually saying to those communities is that we don't care. And each time we have a pushback, each time we have inactive laws or inactive policies, that is exactly the same message we are sending. So we have got to include these communities, and we have got to put pressure and hold everybody accountable. I mean, the Gen Z generation will come at you nonetheless and use new approaches. Social media is what I call an explosion, you know, of how we can disseminate information, vital, adequate, accurate information to our young people. They are craving information around, not just with FGM, but with everything. They want to know. And this idea that we have to wait till they reach a certain age, well, actually the vulnerability we know that they are faced with, they are at a greater risk every day. And Absolutely. So we can't ignore the risk posed by FGM. Every girl to a parent who has been subjected to FGM is at a greater risk. To a community practicing FGM is at a greater risk. So we all have a part to play in driving the change.
Thank you. Rugiatu, yes, I know you're still here. Hello. Yes, yes. Your last word, please.
Unfortunately, electricity has gone.
Oh, but we hear you.
Unfortunately. I want to say, as local organizations working in communities, I just want to encourage the international partners to know that FGM is practiced within a culture that is an African culture. And so therefore, women and Africans who have gone through the practice knows what strategy to use as a way of making the change to uphold the tradition. And so working together as a community is the only way out to end FGM. No one sector is more important. Yes, we suffer directly, but the men are also affected in terms of what is happening. So I want to say thank you for this. And yeah, as we continue the push to work with different ministries in addressing the issue of FGM, every ministry has to get involved to address women's issues. This is not just a gender ministry issue, but it is the issue of every ministry, because every ministry has something to do with women. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Comfort, I believe it's your time.
Thank you. Once again, just to echo what everybody has said, first, thank you for organizing this, and thanks to the speakers, thanks to the participants. And also for me, is about FGM is everybody's business. And again, we all have a great deal of work to do in ending FGM. And I can see that Alimatu is optimistic that we can still end FGM in 2030. We'll see. But for me, it's about working together. We all have to be part of the solution. Also, I would like to just read this that says, I think it's written by Arabi Tobin. It says, oh gosh, my vision is not very good. Yours is not the job. Sorry, I have to put the lights on. I can't see properly. This is very important. It kind of reflects on what we've been talking about. It says, yours is not the job to finish, but neither are you free to take no part. Which means, obviously, we've said so many things about FGM, we've said so many things about women's issues, safeguarding, abuse and all that, but it's very important as communities, as parents, as human to support the work. It's very important that we as well kind of be part of the solution. I think my last word will go to the funders as well. It's very crucial. I work with so many organizations. I work with so many dedicated campaigners, survivors like Alimatu, Hawa, Mama Kadi. Mama Kadi and I, we go a very long way. She was the president of the European Network in the 90s, and I was the vice president. We did lots of work, and with very minimal funding. If the funders are hearing, and also I'll push this back to you, Dr. Danielle, to help in terms of funding to fund the grassroots work. Thank you.
I wish I could, because we are also fighting for funding, of course. Of our work, all of our work is volunteer. And actually, I wanted to apologize to the audience that we didn't have translation because of the same issue. We are fighting to find translation to free every person whose ears and hearts are open and want to hear and want to listen and to share. So we are all in this business, and this United States AID period is scary, but we'll keep at it together. We will keep inspiring each other in the same direction. Thank you so much for mentioning funding. That's the painful part of everything we do. But I believe that just being together has power too, not just money.
Oh, yeah.
So let's not overdo the importance of the funding, because it can get you to be very depressed sometimes. Julia, please, your very last words, also in the name of our collaborating organization on this webinar. Great honor. Go ahead, dear.
No, I want to thank you very much. Thank you all my friends and colleagues and all the participants. I want to thank you also, Niccolo and Peace Without Justice, of course. Last words. I think that we must continue to look at the root causes of FGM, because it is not an isolated issue, but it's a part of a broader system of gender-based oppression that controls women's bodies and choices. So FGM in any form is a violation of human rights, and there is no acceptable version of it. So I think it's about to continue to challenge and fight social norms that limit the rights and autonomy of girls and women. So it's not just about FGM, but it's about all rights of women that we are seeing being violated and being we have seen a lot of results we obtain being challenging now. So it's very important to not to forget where FGM comes from and what is the real objective of our fight.
Absolutely. And Nicolo is sending all of us a heart in the chat. He is our heart. And we rely on your heart, my dear. And we have to stay in touch, all of us. And a big hug from New York. And God bless you. God bless all of us. And thank you for those in the audience who kept with us too. Until next time, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Au revoir. Bye, Cello.